everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am here to talk about romances that I have read off of Kindle Unlimited that I have given 5 stars in the past few months. I started doing these videos I think at some point in 2021, and I just have a really fun time with these videos because I absolutely adore Kindle Unlimited. So whenever I find a new romance that I'm absolutely obsessed with from that service, I have to just shout from the rooftops about it. So I think at this point I have made a playlist of all of these videos that I've made in the past, so I will link that playlist up in the cards above if it exists, and if it doesn't exist, I'll make the playlist. But yeah, so these are books that I've read off of KU that I read about from the end of September to now. First book I want to bring up is Eyes on Me by Sarah Kate. So technically I did give this book 4.5 stars, but it was very close to being a 5-star for me. So this is book 2 in her Salacious Players Club series. I personally enjoyed this book more than Praise, which is book 1. I gave that book 4 stars. But everybody loves Praise, and I feel like not as many people talk about this book or love this book, and I think that's mainly because this is a step-sibling romance. I know that that's not a trope for everyone. I personally really love that trope and really enjoy step-sibling romances. I think it's just a really great forbidden taboo trope, and I just have a fun time with it. So this is about Garrett and Mia. Garrett is one of the owners of the Salacious Players Club, which is a sex club that this whole series centers around because each book is about a different owner of the club. And so Mia is his younger stepsister. I think this is a bit of an age gap too. If I'm not mistaken, he might be in his early 30s and she's in her early 20s. But this is an interesting romance because Garrett has been obsessed with this cam girl for years. He eventually discovers that that cam girl is in fact Mia, his stepsister. So they end up forming an online relationship because he starts paying extra money to have like private chats with her. And so they're falling for each other kind of online, and they're also falling for each other in real life. So of course I loved the forbidden taboo element of this being a step-sibling romance, but also this was incredibly hot and sexy. Sarah Kate does not hold back when it comes to her steamy scenes. She gives you the quantity and she gives you the quality. Something that always stands out in my mind with her steamy scenes is how creative and how much variety she has in all of them. They definitely do not get monotonous by any means. So next up on this list, we have 2 books that I have read by Claire Kent, and I cannot wait to read more from her. But first up, I read Haven, which is book 1 in her Kindled series. This book completely blew me away. I talked about this book a lot in my top romance novellas of 2022 video, so I'll link that up in the cards above. So I'm not going to say too much about this, except that this is a series that is a post-apocalyptic romance series. This one specifically centers around Faith and Jackson. They co-run a sanctuary together, and so it's like a co-workers with benefits to lovers situation, and Claire Kent is the master at writing grumpy yet sweet heroes. Jackson is just everything I could ever want in a romantic partner. He is everything. This story sucks you in from page 1 and does not let you go. And this novella is only like 170 pages, but boy, does it pack the punch. There is so much story in this book and it's amazing. And I also read Last Light, which is technically a standalone, but it takes place in the same world. It's also a prequel to Haven. And this is more of a road trip romance. But these are both survival romances. Obviously they're post-apocalyptic. And that one is a full-length novel. I think it's about 300 pages. And I will say there were points of this book that were a bit slow, but I was just so invested in these characters and their romance that I didn't care, you know. Once again, we just have a grumpy yet sweet hero. There's also an age gap going on in this romance, and it was just absolutely beautiful, and I'm obsessed with this world for some reason. Even though it's an incredibly dire situation, this has also become a comfort series for me. So I cannot wait to continue on with the Kindled series very soon. This is definitely a series that I'm savoring because I don't want to read these books too quickly to the point where I'm gonna have to wait for the next installment. But yes, this series is just absolutely everything to me. So next up on my list, I have Blindsided by Amy Dawes. This is book 2 in her, I believe it's her Harris Brothers series. This is a sports romance series, and this one is a really fantastic friends to lovers romance between Mac, who is a football player, like actual football, soccer, and then Freya, who is a plus-sized heroine. So they've been friends for about a year when the book starts, and so Mac learns that Freya has very little to like no experience when it comes to love and romance and intimacy and all those things. And so he decides to give her lessons in seduction and sex, and things just go on from there. Like I said, just a wonderful friends to lovers romance, incredibly hilarious. I will say I was a little bit annoyed with how like incredibly naive Freya is about sex. Like, it's just completely unbelievable to me that a 30-year-old woman would be that naive about sex. I don't know, it was just a bit much, but I really did love this story, and I definitely want to continue on with the series and with just reading more from Amy Dawes in the future. Next up, we have my favorite comic series that I discovered in 2022. I featured this in my top 10 books of 2022 video, by the way. I will link that video up in the cards above if you are interested. But volumes 1 and 2 of Saga by Fiona Staples and Brian K. Vaughan are on Kindle Unlimited, so just enough to get you truly hooked on the series, and then you're gonna have to buy the volumes yourself or borrow them from your library. But yes, volumes 1 and 2 are on KU. I think the whole series, if I'm not mistaken, is also on Comixology Unlimited, which is another subscription service on Amazon for like manga and comics. But this comic series is like, I don't even have the words for how amazing this series is. I've read the first 3 volumes at this point. There are 10 volumes currently out. But this is an epic science fiction series that also features an amazing romance between Marco and Alana. The art style is absolutely everything. Like, look at them being just the cutest couple and parents. There's a little baby right there. But the very basic plot is that these two are from different races of people, of beings, from 2 different planets that are at war with each other. And so the fact that they got married and had a child together is like the biggest no-no ever. So like all these people are now after them, and they want to kill Marco and Alana and take the baby away from them for some reason that we don't know yet. This is a series that I'm also savoring because there's only 10 volumes so far. So I don't want to rush through this series and then have to wait for volume 11, because who knows when that volume's going to come out. By the way, if you need more incentive to pick up this series, as amazing and epic as it is, the romance is everything to me. Marco, the hero, he's one of the swooniest heroes ever. Like, I want him for myself. I love this fictional man with my heart and soul. So hopefully, if nothing else inspired you to pick up this series, me gushing about Marco did. So next up, let's see, I have Flawless by Elsie Silver. This is a book and a romance that so many of my bookish friends were just raving and raving about in 2022. And so finally in October, I picked this up, and I agree with the hype. I think that this is just a wonderful small town bull rider romance. We have Rhett, who has gotten himself involved in some scandals in his career, and I think he's losing some sponsorships because of that. And so Summer, our heroine, is tasked with essentially being his babysitter to make sure that he doesn't get into any more scandals. So they kind of don't like each other at first. This is marketed as an enemies to lovers romance, but it's not true enemies. They don't truly hate each other, but it's more just like that they bicker and banter back and forth. And this served the emotions, this served the romance, and this certainly served the steamy scenes. What more could you want from a small town romance? I put in my Goodreads review that this was pretty darn near flawless, as the title suggests. Next up, we have 2 books in a series that centers around dinosaur shifters. This is the Relic series by Mazmatics. Book 1 is Smash and Grab, and book 2, I'll get to in a second, is Sink or Swim. But this is an MM romance series that centers around dinosaur shifters, like I said. So these are people that can shift from human forms to dinosaur forms as you would assume, right? But this series centers around Relic, which is this organization that is all about the preserving of dinosaur fossils. They are making sure that fossils don't fall into the wrong hands and aren't being bought and sold illegally. And so this first book is about Simon and Dalton. Simon is a paleontologist, and at the very beginning of the book, someone like breaks into his lab and is trying to steal a fossil that he's working on, and then Dalton shows up. He is our dinosaur shifter hero, and he in fact works for Relic. And so this turns into a road trip romance, and Dalton is an absolute icon. He's like one of the coolest people, dinosaur shifters ever, and their romance was just sweet, sexy, and hilarious. And then book 2, Sink or Swim, was somehow even better than book 1. I was absolutely obsessed with book 1, but this was so just wonderful. This is a Grumpy Sunshine romance where both heroes are dinosaur shifters. So we have Baja, who works for Relic, and then Jackson, who is brought on to Relic because there is this cruise going on where fossils are going to be illegally bought and sold. And so Jackson has connections, and so he gets Baja onto the cruise so that they can go undercover and get this one specific fossil out from the clutches of the people that are running this cruise. And so what ends up happening is that they have to pretend to be engaged to each other. So we've got the fake fiance thing going on, we've got the Grumpy Sunshine thing going on, and yeah, this was wonderful. This gave me action, adventure, romance, was incredibly hilarious, and just like the perfect amount of steamy scenes as well. So I know this series has a very weird idea and premise around it, but please just trust my recommendation and give these books a chance. I think there's 4 books total in the series so far. I definitely need to go ahead and continue on. Next up, I want to mention The Surviving Trace by Kalia Reed. This is book 1 in a time travel romance series that consists of 3 books. So I did read the entire trilogy and I enjoyed all 3 books for the most part, but book 1 is next level to me. This is an incredible time travel romance. We have Serene, who is living in present day. Through different circumstances, she ends up time traveling back to 1912, where she meets our hero, Etienne. And this is a hate to love romance because when she time travels, she ends up like taking over the life of the Serene from 1912. And so the Serene from 1912 is in a marriage of convenience with Etienne, but they definitely don't like nor respect each other. So when present day Serene takes over old Serene's life, Etienne is immediately just very antagonistic with her. And so she eventually convinces Etienne that she is in fact from the future. And so they start falling in love with each other. This book had me in a choke hold from page 1. There was something about the writing that just really sucked me in. I was incredibly invested in this romance between Etienne and Serene. Like the hate to love dynamic was just really unique and really well done in my opinion. And like I said, books 2 and 3, like they were good. They weren't anything amazing. But like the series as a whole, I would probably give 4 stars. But like I said, this first book is incredible and I couldn't help but give it 5 stars. Okay, so next we have some romances that I was reading in October and November. So these are more like paranormal romances. So definitely put these books on your list to read for next Halloween. But first up, we have Blood Moon by Gillian Graves. So this is like a business rivals to lovers romance novella. We have Vlad, who is just a hot vampire. He owns this club. And then we have Hazel, who is a plus-sized witch, and she owns a club and a bar like directly across the street from Vlad's, and so they're in direct competition with each other. But Vlad doesn't want to compete with her, but his boss is like making him compete with her business, if that makes sense. And so their romance starts with a one-night stand where they don't know who each other is. But once Hazel finds out that Vlad is in fact her competition, she definitely is not a big fan of him anymore, and so things just go on from there. This was fun, incredibly hot and sexy. I was just here for the vibe. This is the perfect novella to read for, you know, the autumn season and for Halloween as a whole. Next up, I want to bring up Soul Eater by Lily Mayne. This is a book that Jen from the Book Refuge had recommended to me numerous times, I think, by the time that I finally picked up the book. This is definitely one of the most unique romances I've ever read. We have Daniel, our main character, who is human. This is taking place in a post-apocalyptic world. I think 20 years before the main story starts, there was like this portal that opened up on Earth, and all these monsters started showing up and wreaking havoc on Earth. And so now we're in the United States. Everything is pretty much a wasteland. Your only choices for survival at this point are either joining a group and surviving with them or joining the military. And so that's what Daniel, our main character, does. And so the military is just trying to find ways to either kill these monsters or detain them, you know, put them in prison basically. And so there is this monster, Wynn, who is just killing all of these people, and the military is, you know, dead set on detaining him by any means necessary. And so Daniel goes out on this mission with all of these other military personnel. He's one of the very few people to survive Wynn's attack. And so we see throughout the course of the novel that Wynn just has this connection to Daniel and vice versa. And so this turns into like a road trip romance. And like I said, one of the most unique romances I've ever read, beautifully written, and it's crazy that this is Lily Mayne's first novel because you wouldn't think so from reading it. I definitely want to continue on with this series. Also, this is incredibly spicy. Quite a lot of sex scenes in this. Very unique because of the type of being that Wynn is. I'll just leave it at that. Okay, next up I have to bring up two straight up bonkers monster romance novellas that I read towards the end of October. These are both by Vera Valentine. So the first one is Squeak. This is an MMF poly romance where we have a human woman and the two heroes are balloon animal shifters. You heard that correct. These are men that can shift from being humans to being balloon animals. And I know that sounds absolutely stupid, but this novella was actually really good. Like, I don't even know how to explain why this novella was so good, but one of the things is that the two heroes have past trauma because of this sorceress, this woman who created them. Essentially, they were just balloon animals and she made them into humans, and so they were her slaves, and so they were able to escape her, and now they work at this zoo together. And so our heroine meets them because she's an artist, and so she's just kind of people watching, drawing different people, and so she forms a relationship with the two heroes. This is also an Omegaverse romance, which I don't read a ton of Omegaverse. It's not really something that's for me, but yeah, like, this was actually a really good romance. I will say the ending was very, very rushed. I wish that this would have had like 10 to 20 more pages so that the ending could have been more fleshed out, because like literally in the span of like 3 pages, like everything happened, I feel like. If that ending hadn't been so rushed, I absolutely would have given this 5 stars. But all that to say, if you're in the mood for something weird, but like oddly enough good quality, I would recommend this. I also really loved Hayseed by Vera Valentine. This is a romance between our heroine, who, she has an abusive boyfriend, but it's impossible for her to get out of this relationship. She lives in a very small town where there's cornfields surrounding her house. And so through some magic, the scarecrow that is behind her house comes to life, and it's a romance between the two of them. And there are steamy scenes where her and the scarecrow are having a good time in front of the abusive ex-boyfriend. So like there's a cuckold situation going on. Really bonkers, wild, but so much fun. And the hero, the scarecrow dude, he was very swoony. So you know what? I recommend it. It was a fun time. If you want something bonkers for next Halloween, this is a really good one to go with. I also have to mention That Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf by Kimberly Lemming. This is the follow-up to That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon, which was one of my absolute favorite novellas that I read in 2022. I also really loved this second installment. This one is about Bree and Felix, who is a werewolf, and just as the title suggests, one night they're all at a bar, Bree and the hero and heroine from book 1, and there's this dude trying to hit on Bree, and she wants nothing to do with him, and so this dude gives her a drink that has been laced with love potion, and so in her frustration she throws the drink at this asshole, but he ducks his head and the drink ends up hitting Felix, our werewolf hero, and so Felix immediately falls head over heels for Bree. But over the course of the novella, we see that he does form very real love for her and vice versa. It's not just the love potion that's influencing him. And so this is kind of a fated mate situation as well because he's a werewolf. Just like with That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon, this is incredibly funny, just a truly delightful fantasy rom-com. There's also this random side character, Alexis, who is this talking sword, and she is just absolutely unhinged and a menace to society, and I was obsessed with her. So yeah, can't recommend this book enough, can't recommend this series enough. I need to read the other novella that's in this series. I think it's called Mistletoe. That one is more of like a Christmas romance, obviously, and I just can't wait to see what Kimberly Lemming does with this series going forward. It's so well done and so unique. Definitely has a very cozy vibe to it while also being a high fantasy story. Next up, we have Carnal Urges by J.T. Geisinger. This is book 2 in her Queens and Monsters series. This is a captor-captive romance between Declan and Sloane. Basically, Sloane ends up kind of starting a mafia war, I think, in book 1, which was Ruthless Creatures. And so Declan kidnaps her, and Sloane is so funny. She's one of the funniest heroines that I've ever met, and her and Declan end up forming this just iconic relationship. Like, they're just such an awesome and badass and entertaining couple. I really don't have much more to say than that. Declan and Sloane are everything to me, and I need to continue on with the series at some point. Next up, we have Moonstruck by Onley Janes. This is book 3 in her Necessary Evil series. I featured this series in my top 10 favorite contemporary romances of 2022. I'll link that up in the cards above. I specifically talked about Psycho in that video, but I also really loved Moonstruck, which is book 3. I've given every book that I've read so far in the series 5 stars. This is just an amazing and unique dark serial killer romance series that also features romances. This one was iconic because of the meet cute. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, all the meet cutes in this series are amazing and iconic. But we have Atticus, who is one of the 7 Mulvaney brothers that this series centers around. They're all serial killers and they're all psychopaths. And so he's sent on a mission to kill this specific person, but when he shows up to kill this person, Jericho, our other hero, is already there in the middle of killing him. So we've got like a murder husbands situation going on. So they end up killing this guy together and then immediately hooking up, and things just go on from there. Onley James, one of the things I love about her romances is that though I think in all 3 of the books in the series so far, like the 2 heroes like hook up very early on in the story, but she still keeps the romances interesting. Like, it's not like I get bored because the heroes hooked up so early on in the story. What can I say? Just like the first 2 books in this series, this was just a very addictive, darker romance for sure. Lots of murder and violence. You need to know that before going in, but yet these romances have a very sweet and wholesome element to them, and I love the found family aspect as well, especially because both Jericho and Atticus have these like very interesting and eccentric families. So yeah, I can't wait to continue on with the series ASAP for sure. We have 2 books left that I want to talk about. First up is 'Tis the Season for Revenge by Morgan Elizabeth. This is a book, a Christmas romance, obviously, as you can tell, that so many of my bookish friends were reading and raving about in November into December, and so I knew that I needed to pick it up for the holiday season, and my amazing friend Ava from Ava's Romance Books actually bought me a copy and gifted it to me, so thank you so much, Ava. But this is kind of a play on Legally Blonde. We have our main character Abby at the very beginning of the story. She is with her boyfriend, isn't his name? Yeah, Richard, pictured here. He dumps her in a very cruel way at the very beginning of the book, and now she's hell-bent on getting revenge against him. The best way that she thinks of getting revenge against him is to start dating his boss. He works at a law firm, so she wants to start dating his boss so that he'll end up taking her to their company Christmas party at the end of the year. So she'll really show Richard what he's missing by no longer being with her. And okay, I did not expect this romance to be as hot as it was, because it's an illustrated cover, you know? I don't expect a lot of steam from these kind of covers. But Morgan Elizabeth went there, okay? And Damien, our hero, he's perfect. He's perfect. Like, literally no flaws, none at all. He's sweet, he's caring, he knows what he's doing in the bedroom, for sure. Lots of dirty talk. We've got some praise and degradation kink that is just chef's kiss. So good. I love romance novels with a revenge plot, so I really enjoyed that element as well. I really liked how the third act conflict wrapped up as well. To me, this is just a perfect Christmas romance. So highly recommend that you add this to your TBR for next Christmas. And last, but certainly not least, is an amazing, delicious, and delectable unhinged mafia romance. That is Mafia Madman by Mila Fanelli. This is book 3 in her Kings of Italy series. The first 2 books of the series center around the same couple, and this book is about Enzo and Gia. So Enzo is rivals with Fausto, who was the hero from the first 2 books, and Gia is the sister to Francesca, who's the heroine from book 1. So this is a captor-captive romance. Clearly, I enjoy that trope now that I'm talking about it. And Enzo is pretty much a psychopath. He's unhinged, but like in the best way possible. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it for you. Things get incredibly twisted in this book for sure. Like, the second he kidnaps Gia, he keeps her naked in a cage on his yacht. Like, it's crazy, it's wild for sure. But Gia is just like the perfect match for him in every way. And I love this game of cat and mouse that they're playing with each other. And I just thought this was perfect. Highly recommend the audiobooks, by the way, for this series. They are very well done. Very excited for book 4 of this series, which is Mafia Target, because that's going to be an MM romance about Giulio and Alessio. That is a romance that has pretty much been set up since book 1. But basically we see in this book that Enzo tasks Alessio with killing Giulio. So that's going to be some enemies to lovers goodness. Very excited. I believe that book is coming out, I think, in early March. But yes, this was bonkers. It was wild. It was crazy. And I absolutely adored it. So that is going to be it for all of the romances that I read off of Kindle Unlimited that I gave 5 stars from the end of September to January. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video and got some really great recommendations. Obviously, I adore all of these books. Highly recommend them. If you guys have recommendations for books that you've read off of Kindle Unlimited, please leave them in the comments below for not only myself, but for other people that are watching this video. I would also love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!